All right, today we're diving into a new kind of digital world. It's this massive, sprawling, intelligent network that some people are calling a global brain. Sounds cool, right? But in a place this vast and complex, how on earth do you find your way, let alone get an edge?
I mean, really think about that for a second. When a digital protocol starts to act like its own country, with hundreds of different industries, how do you even begin to wrap your head around it? That's the big question we're going to tackle. So let's introduce the subject, Bittensor. And this isn't just another crypto token, not by a long shot. The vision here is to build a decentralized global brain, basically an open marketplace where machine intelligence itself is the thing being bought and sold.
Now, what really makes Bittensor different is its whole foundation. You've heard of Bitcoin's proof of work, right? Where computers burn tons of energy solving abstract puzzles? Well, Bittensor uses something called proof of useful work. This means people get rewarded for doing stuff the world actually needs, like running AI models or processing important data. It's a total game changer.
Okay, but here's the thing. When you have an ambition that big, it creates an equally massive problem. The sources for this explainer call it the Tower of Babel problem, and honestly, it's a perfect metaphor for the challenge anyone faces trying to get involved here.
See, Bittensor isn't just one thing. It's more like a federation, a whole swarm of over 118 separate, competing little economies called subnets. And that number? It's only going to get bigger. The plan is to push it towards more than 1,000. And each one of these subnets is basically its own little startup with its own unique product. You got one that's going head-to-head with OpenAI, another one is busy indexing the web, and a third is building these wild autonomous AI agents. The point is they all speak completely different languages, both technically and economically. So what's the result of all this wild diversity? Well, it's a massive cognitive overload. It is just way too much for any single person to track, to audit, and to actually understand what's going on in the entire ecosystem. It's an overwhelming amount of noise. And this complexity, it isn't just confusing. It's a very, very real financial risk. For anyone putting their capital into this network, the cost of not knowing what you're doing is incredibly high. This brings us to a classic idea from finance, information asymmetry. It's all about that gap between what the insiders, the developers who can actually read the code, know, and what everybody else knows. In a system as complex as this one, that gap can be absolutely enormous.
So why is that gap so big? Because the real truth, the ground truth, is buried deep. It's hidden away in the code on GitHub, scattered across fragmented chats on Discord, and locked up in cryptic transactions on the blockchain itself. For you and me, the cost of actually verifying what's real, it's just impossibly high. And listen, this risk is becoming super urgent. There's a huge upgrade coming called Dynamic TAO, or dTAO, and it's going to change the entire game. Instead of just passively earning rewards from the whole network, users will have to actively pick and choose which specific subnets to stake their assets on. You choose wrong, and you're facing real economic consequences. All of a sudden, information goes from being a nice-to-have to an absolute must-have. So how in the world do you solve a problem of this scale? How do you make something so unintelligible intelligible? Well, the solution is to build a user interface, not for a single app, but for the entire protocol itself. What this chaotic, noisy market desperately needs is an interface layer. The best way to think about it is like a translator. Its entire job is to take all that high-friction, super technical noise we've been talking about and convert it into a low-friction, actionable signal that people can actually use to make smart decisions. And a perfect case study for this is a media entity called Tao Daily. It's more than just a news site. It's effectively functioning as the essential user interface for the whole Bittensor protocol. So how does this actually work in practice, right? How do you really translate complex lines of code into decisions about where to put your capital? Let's break it down. Just look at this comparison. It says it all. On the left, you have that raw data, a GitHub commit that is, let's be honest, totally meaningless to 99% of people. But then look at the right. That's the translation. It gives you context, a competitive benchmark, and a clear signal of real progress. This is how you turn noise into an actual investment thesis. And this translation work gives you a serious tactical edge across the board. What looks like just a cryptic registration is actually a blue-chip team from Stanford jumping into the game. A random block height becomes a clear 6-month warning that a supply shock is coming. This is how you literally convert complexity into capability. And a related podcast, the TAO Pod, pushes this idea even further. It suggests we shouldn't think of this as picking a winning stock. Instead, it's about accumulating alpha, which is basically a share in the productive output of an entire decentralized industry. It's a huge mental shift. You're not just owning a piece of a company, you're owning a piece of a digital commodity itself. Okay, let's zoom out for a minute. This whole model, having an information layer that translates a complex protocol, this has massive implications for the future of all decentralized economies. And there's a real clock ticking here. That dTAO upgrade we mentioned is set to go live in the first quarter of 2025, and then a halving event that slashes token issuance in half is scheduled for the end of that year. These are huge market-moving events that make having good information right now absolutely critical. And what's really fascinating here is the business model behind it all. Tao Daily isn't some independent blog. It's actually owned by a publicly traded company, Tao Synergies. This creates this incredible feedback loop. Clear information helps the network grow, which in turn increases the value of the digital assets held by the parent company. It's pretty genius. So all of this leaves us with one final big question. As our digital worlds get more and more complex, more decentralized, does the ability to translate that complexity to create signal from all that noise become the single most valuable asset? In this new world, maybe information isn't just power. Maybe it's the ultimate currency.